fun with this gift. Teamwork is decided by destiny.
Clouds high, the birds call into the wind.
Yeah, don't do this. Hey y'all, welcome to my Kazuha guide as of Genshin Impact 3.7. Kazuha is one of the best characters in the game, with him being an animal character that can buff your team's damage significantly by swirling elements, being incredibly flexible as well as easy to build. Yeah, it's easy to say that he's a better Sucrose, but at first, most players didn't realize just how right they were. So in this guide, I'll be covering everything you need to know about Kazuha. Without further ado, let's plunge right into it. First up, Kazuha's talents and what they do. His normal attack is a set of physical slashes that are kind of pointless unless you have some sort of infusion. Only thing worthy of mentioning here is his plunging damage, as it ties into his elemental skill. Kazuha's elemental skill, called Shihayabaru, propels him into the air, drawing in nearby enemies, and gains an effect that will change his next plunging attack to do animal damage, called the Midare Ranzan. After using Midare Ranzan and landing, Kazuha will create a small wind tunnel that pulls in enemies again, this time with a weaker pull. There are two variations of this move, a press and a hold. The press version has a shorter cooldown, deals less damage, and has a smaller AoE when compared to holding it. Both versions have their benefits and drawbacks, depending on the situation you're in. If you want to deal some quick damage with Kazuha and activate support effects, use the press version. If you're looking to group up more enemies in one go, the held version is better for that. Also, Kazuha's first ascension passive makes him do an extra hit of elemental damage on your plunge attack based on the element you absorb when you cast his skill. Now let's go over his elemental burst, Kazuha Slash. With a very uninspired name, Kazuha slashes open a field that does AoE animal damage for a few seconds that will absorb an element and swirl that for 8 seconds, then go on a 15-second cooldown. This ability makes up most of Kazuha's damage as well as his value on a team when combined with his 4th Ascension passive. If everything that has been mentioned thus far has not sold you on Kazuha, well, this next thing will. Kazuha's 4th Ascension passive will grant your party an elemental damage bonus based on his elemental mastery stat when he triggers a swirl. Every 250 points of EM Kazuha has will equal 10% elemental damage bonus that he will give to the entire party. Not only that, but it can give the damage bonus to more than one element, which I'll get to in the advanced tips section. This is the thing that makes him broken, boosting your team's damage significantly. Say you have about 700 EM or so, which is totally achievable with main stats and substats. That would give your team a 28% elemental damage bonus for the element or elements that you swirl, which is more than half of a goblet main stat just tacked onto your characters from pressing a button. Now that you know what his talents do, which one should you level first? If you are purely using him for his A4 passive and Viridescent Venerer, you don't need to level his talents at all. But that would be a huge waste of Kazuha's own damage. So for his talent priority, level up his burst first, as it is the biggest part of his damage. And secondly, it is a tie between his elemental skill and normal attack talents, since they will both offer him similar increases in damage when leveling. Leveling the normal attack talent is mainly for the Midare Ranzan plunging attack after his skill, but can be useful for any infusion effects you have like Bennett C6 or his own. After all that, you might be wondering what the best way to build him is, so let's get into that. First things first about the build. Swirl damage, which is most of Kazuha's personal damage, is purely based on his character level and elemental mastery. For this reason, to get the most damage out of him, you want to level him to 90 first. Moving on to artifacts. Let's start with the set. Yeah, singular. 4-set Viridescent Venerer. That's it. 15% animal damage bonus, swirl damage, and reducing elemental resistance of whatever element you swirl by 40%. There is nothing better for Kazuha. Okay, well, there is one more set should you want something fun to try out. 4-set Thundering Fury. This one can be used for more gimmicky aggravate teams since you're causing a lot of aggravates when using his burst to swirl Electro onto Dendro, so you can basically spam his elemental skill, if you're into that sort of thing. More often than not though, Viridescent Venerer is the set that you want on Kazuha. Now it is time to go over the stats you want on your artifacts. This part has had one big misunderstanding since Kazuha's launch. Allow me to fix that. Build Kazuha on triple EM main stats. That is the best way to build him for you to fully use all of his abilities while still making him do damage. Look, I get that his talents scale on attack, but swirl damage can do more. What's more, building him for attack over EM basically makes his A4 passive do nothing. That said, you can still build for attack and crit in subs should you want to, but not before prioritizing elemental mastery as well as energy recharge, since you want to be using his burst for every rotation. A safe energy recharge range is 160 to 180 for C0. This number can go up or down depending on your team setup, but that is generally a safe range for ER if you go through 2 skill usages in one rotation. So, you know what artifacts to build on him. What about his weapon? Kazuha prefers weapons that, again, have either EM or ER as its secondary stat. Once again, you can run crit weapons should you want to, but they're generally not recommended. Starting from the cheapest option, moving up. First, we have the Dark Iron Sword. Should you not have a single sword billet or be unfortunate as to not pull any sword that I'll mention later, you can pick up a Dark Iron Sword from this NPC in Liyue Harbor. This sword should be seen as a temporary solution at best, because while it does have an EM secondary stat, it's a 3-star weapon, meaning that it scales worse than 4-star options. Next up, we have the craftable Iron Sting. Iron Sting is a really good free-to-play option because it offers an EM stat as well as a damage increasing passive. For this reason, it is basically the best 4-star option Kazuha has if you don't need his weapon to help him with his energy. An alternative to it can be the weapon that was given out during a version 3.3 event, the Tokubo Shigure. It gives the same secondary stat with a similar passive. Moving on to 4-star gacha options, we have Favonius Sword, Sacrificial Sword, and Zephos Moonlight. Favonius is a great option if you find that you're lacking energy recharge, as not only does it give you more than 60% just from being leveled up to 90, but the passive gives energy particles when you land a crit. Because of these effects, this is the best 4-star gacha weapon that Kazuha can get all year round. Sacrificial Sword can be an alternative to Favonius because it has the same ER stat and lets him use his skill again so as to improve his personal damage. But this eats up more on-field time, and honestly, the skill reset isn't worth it over the effect of some other weapons, but it can still be a good option. Lastly, Zephos Moonlight. Earlier, I made a point of mentioning that Favonius Sword is the best 4-star gacha weapon that Kazuha can have all year round. Well, this is the better option that you can get from limited event banners. Zephos Moonlight not only has the 165 EM stat like Iron Sting and Tokubo Shigure, but also has an effect that gives ER based on the total EM the wielder has, playing to both Kazuha's strength and weakness in choosing weapons. Should you have it, Zephos Moonlight provides incredible value to Kazuha by making him stronger at his support role while not needing to invest nearly as much into maintaining it. Lastly, the 5-star category. Honestly, you don't have many good options in the 5-star category. Freedom Sworn is Kazuha's situationally best weapon. Yeah, situational. While it does currently have the highest secondary stat of EM for a sword, the effect isn't a huge step up from the 4-star options. Freedom Sworn gives a flat 10% damage boost to the wielder, and when you activate 2 elemental reactions, your party gets a buff to their attack as well as their normal, charged, and plunging attacks. Once you get that buff, it will last for 12 seconds with a 20-second cooldown. Freedom Sworn will be his best if you're not struggling to get his burst up, but if you are, Zephos, Favonius, and Iron Sting will do about the same, if not better than it. Other options include the Scoured Blade because of its energy recharge stat, but at that point, just use Favonius or Sacrificial since they give more recharge with better passives to help it even further. And then the crit swords. But no. Overall, Kazuha's got a lot of weapon options that are amazing for him, so pick the best one for your needs. With the build out of the way, let's talk about Kazuha's Constellations and if they're worth the money or 3 years of good luck. Kazuha's Constellations just improve on what he's already good at and offer some quality of life upgrades. So let's go through them. Starting at C1. C1 reduces Kazuha's skill cooldown by 10% and resets the cooldown of it whenever you use his burst. This enables him to run lower energy recharge because you get to use his skill twice per rotation, as well as getting extra damage due to him using his skill again. Kazuha's second Constellation is the biggest power spike Kazuha can get. C2 gives Kazuha and your active character 200 bonus EM when standing in the Autumn World wind field created by his burst. Sucrose is actually considered pretty equal to Kazuha in terms of power scaling up to this point, since they offer different buffs to your team that have similar value. But after Kazuha's second Constellation, their buffs overlap and Kazuha just becomes better than Sucrose. C3 and 5 increase skill and burst talent level respectively. C4 also lowers his energy recharge requirement, giving him extra flat energy when using his elemental skill or gliding. But this Constellation isn't particularly worth spending on unless you're going straight to C6. Kazuha's Constellation 6 gives him an animal infusion for 5 seconds after using his skill or burst. Also, for every point of elemental mastery Kazuha has, it'll increase his normal, charged, and plunging attack damage by 0.2%. This gives you the option of running him as an on-field damage dealer. Moreover, this allows you to change his build into a traditional DPS build of attack animal crit and not lose too much in terms of overall damage.
Hold it!
However, stacking high amounts of EM is still very good for him as it was before. To wrap up his constellations, Kazuha has some pretty good upgrades in his early ones with C1 and C2, and being able to change how you play him with C6. Good stopping points for his constellations are C0, C2, and finally, should you want him to be in main DPS, C6. Now, Kazuha is pretty simple to play. You know, swirl the enemy, get more damage. But there are some advanced techniques you can use that I'll explain here. A hidden mechanic to note about Kazuha is that there is a priority list for the elements his burst and A1 passive will choose to absorb. The on-world wind field and the plunge absorption will choose to absorb Pyro, Hydro, Electro, and lastly Cryo in that order. For example, one enemy may be affected by Pyro and another by Hydro. When using Kazuha's Slash, the on-world wind will choose to absorb Pyro since it is higher in priority. So keep that in mind in case you want to infuse your burst with a specific element. This next tip will boost your team damage significantly, and that's double swirl. This has to do with another hidden mechanic dubbed the elemental gauge theory, and I'll leave a link in the description that explains it. But basically, you know how Kazuha can buff your team and debuff enemies from what he swirls? Imagine that, but with 2 elements. For this, let's take the Child International team for example. You can apply Hydro onto enemies using Child's stance change from his skill, switch to Bennett and use his burst, then switch to Kazuha and use his burst into his skill. This lets you not only get more Hydro damage bonus, but Pyro as well. Not to mention, combining this with the Viridescent Venerer 4 set, you can shred the resistance of both elements that you swirl. By the way, this doesn't just apply to Hydro and Pyro, it can also work with any 2 swirlable elements. With the advanced techniques out of the way, let's go over the teams you can play Kazuha in. Kazuha can fit in pretty much every reaction team under the f***ing sun. Freeze, vaporize, melt, aggravate, and spread. Basically any team you can think of besides physical and mono geo. Kazuha is a very flexible character due to being animo and being able to buff any swirlable elemental damage. But let's go one by one here. Starting with freeze. Kazuha is a nice slot in for freeze, especially over Sucrose since he buffs elemental damage bonus instead of elemental mastery, which is useless in freeze teams. Freeze teams generally want double cryo, then 1 hydro to fill out the rest of the party. Vaporize, where you can use the mold of Kazuha and Bennett, and then really any Hydro or Pyro character, which can be Child and Xiangling for international, Diluc and Xingqiu or Yelan. You can even just do Xiangling and Xingqiu or Yelan. Melt can have Ganyu or Rosaria as your Melt driver, then Zhongli or Xiangling. You can run Electro Hyper Carry with Raiden, Saura, Bennett, Aggravate or Spread with him plus 1 or 2 Electro and Dendro characters, Hyper Bloom and Burgeon as the Dendro core trigger, even Animal Hyper Carry since the scalings on his abilities make him do a lot of damage. All in all, any reaction-based team that just needs a character to fill in an extra slot, Kazuha can fill that role. In the case of Kazuha, I don't think there's much of a need for a showcase since he mainly functions as a support that helps the other characters in your teams. Let's wrap up this video. Kazuha is a phenomenal character. He is ridiculously OP. If not thanks to his elemental damage bonus, then it's the ability to group up enemies close together. If not even that, it's being able to swirl as to activate the 4-set effect of the Viridescent Venerer set. There are hardly any teams that you wouldn't want to put Kazuha in, with the exceptions being physical or mono geo. But even if he may not be the best choice for some of the teams I've mentioned, he's still a damn good one should you need a 4th character for your team. He's got a pretty simple building process and a massive list of teams he can fit into, especially if it's a reaction team. Let me know with a comment down below if this guide was helpful to you. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you back for another video. See ya.